For as long as I can remember, there was one issue that I've noticed that Eastern titles always had to deal with, and specifically Japanese titles, and that is having to appeal to both their own markets, the in-house Asian and Japanese markets, and appealing to Western markets and Western sensibilities. And I think we have a recorded history of numerous Japanese titles over the years having to compromise in order to appeal to the global Western market, because mass appeal and all that stuff. In the wake of Eastern titles that are just, I think, are doing very well in the industry at the moment, and definitely we're hitting a lot of heavy hitters and such like that. One article caught my attention, and deals with an atelier series producer basically having to try to satisfy both Asian and Western audiences. I thought this was an article that could be interesting for us to go into, and it might be more of a cut and dry opinion from me, but I thought this was definitely something worth talking about. Let's get right into it, shall we? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. My name is Makini90, artist, dreamer, and illustrator. Welcome you to another video here on the Makini Draws channel. Hope you all are doing well today. And this topic although I was interested in this topic was actually voted on by my subscribers. I put a community poll up last week talking about what topics that they want me to see me cover for this week's commentary video, and a majority of the votes came to this one, talking about the producer for the Atelier series having difficulty in trying to satisfy both Asian and Western gameplay demands. I think it'd be definitely worth kind of getting into and sharing my thoughts on this. So before we do this, smack that like button, make it jiggle, smack that subscribe button, make it jiggle. We're going to be using an article from Ryan Pearson on Valiant Comics, although there is also an article from Automaton West, and for the more cultured ones, Sankaku Complex. All I'm just saying is, if you're going to use Sankaku Complex, just make sure you got your filters on and you do it privately. I'm kidding. Anyway, let's get right into it. This comes from Ryan Pearson at Bounty in the Comics, and I will leave all the links to all three articles in the description, so take it what you will. Atelier series producer admits difficulty in trying to satisfy both Asian and Western gameplay demands. Asks fans to, quote, keep sharing your opinions. Now, for a little background here, the Atelier series, I apologies if I get that name title, but the Atelier series is a series of Japanese RPGs from Koei Tecmo that has been around for over 25 years and has garnered a lot of support, a lot of popularity, a long fan base, especially in its native Japanese region. However, with some of the more recent Atelier titles have gotten some very global attention as well, which has definitely been a beneficiary for the series as a whole. However, with the Japanese title getting global attention, that problem arises. So let's get right into this article. According to Atelier Yumiya producer Junzo Hosoi, while the franchise's recent boom of international success is certainly welcome, it also brings with the distinct challenge of how to simultaneously satisfy the wildly different gameplay demands of both Asian and Western players. Offering his thoughts on the East and West divide during a recent interview at a video game news outlet Automaton, Hosoi recalled, quote, recently I went to Europe and North America for the first time to do some work regarding the Atelier Yumiya. There, I could feel the contrast between the Asian and Western sentiment, as well as the differences between our way of thinking and the Western players' demands. For example, in the West, many players have been looking for more of a straightforward, action-packed gameplay experience, he explained. However, in Asia, that kind of direction would be considered too simple, and players say they would rather like to focus on making synthesis, a staple in the Atelier gameplay series mechanic that, as the name suggests, invite players to fuse items together in order to make different ones stronger. While hearing all these opinions, it makes me realize how difficult game development actually is. I still want players to leave a Steam review and give us some kind of feedback, but it's really a valuable information for us, so I concluded. That's why I want to tell our players to keep on sharing your opinions with us. Though the producer was explicitly talking about the difference between East and West gameplay demands, some on social media had a knee-jerk reaction to Automaton's headline. Quote, as the Atelier franchise goes global, the dev team is torn about how to reconcile Western and Japanese players, vastly offering different demands, and presumed he was instead talking about each region's differing views on attractive characters. However, Hosoe did admit that during a 2023 interview with Nintendo Life, the series was making a conscious move away from fan service in order of a wider audience appeal. It should be explicitly noted that the topic of character designs and art styles did not come up during this recent talk with Automaton. Further, despite in his shift in art directions, fans can rest easy knowing that the Atelier franchise is still delivering its fair share of attractive female characters, from the ample-chested Yumiya and Atelier Yumiya to Atelier Riser's lines, titular herons with their huge, let's just say, thighs.
Oh my Jesus.
She bad, ain't she?
Lord Jesus Christ.
Apologies. Ultimately, in the light of various, I'm scrolling down as I'm reading this. Ultimately, in the light of various responses that their coverage received, the topics ranging from gameplay, art directions, otherwise, Automaton both thanked the fans in the feedback and promised, we make sure to get your message across the desk at Koei Tecmo. And that's the end of the article from Ryan Pearson of Bounded Comics, and of course I'll leave the other articles from both Automaton West and Sankaku Complex, all links in the description. Now, from my personal standpoint, and I will stand by this, on this whole thing, I personally believe that the Atelier series should stick to what works for them, stick to appealing to, their roots, appealing to their Japanese audience, despite the international appeal. And honestly, the Western feedback should be taken with a grain of salt. The reason I say that is because, and I speak this as a Western, a lot of us have gotten into anime, a lot of us have gotten into Asian content because it is vastly different from what we have here in the West. And its difference in what we have here in the West in regards to how their content is portrayed, how their standards are, how even their standards and such like that has been very interesting to Western viewers like me who have consumed this content for arguably most of their life. And we always run into this issue in regards to specifically Japanese content and specifically Japanese video games having to tone down, having to make sweeping changes, or in some cases having to completely outright censor in order to appeal to Western global markets, Western standards. And that is something that a lot of us, the Japanese audience is very fearful of that, always fearful of that. But I think the Japanese also need to understand that Westerners don't want that either. We want, I know I speak for myself, but Westerners, for me, I want, if I'm going to play an Eastern title, if I'm going to play a Japanese title, I want to play it the way it was intended. I want to experience that content the way it was originally intended, because that's what makes me interested. That's what makes a lot of people interested, especially a lot of Westerners interested in that. But I think that, and this is something that I saw V Lack of Entertainment made a video on, is that the middle ground that kind of breaks, that kind of causes this divide, that causes this issue for Japanese developers and creators, is the West itself, is the quote unquote gatekeepers. It's the it's the publishers. We have to tone all of this down. We have to change this up so that Westerners can garner an international appeal. It can garner a much more Western appeal. And frankly, in my humble opinion, that shouldn't be the case. That's actually not the case. How many times have we gone off? How many times have there been articles and have there been videos of people, and have there been posts of people going off at localizers for purposefully mistranslating Japanese content to appeal to the Western audience? And in a case where localizers will take something that was, that probably meant something different in Japan, and not tune it for Western audiences, but tune it for their own personal messaging, for their own personal ideology, for their own personal grandizing and such like that. The problem is that it's almost like it's a middleman thing, where the localizers, the publishers, the ones who are supposed to kind of bring this Japanese content over to the States, think that the American audience can't handle these kind of topics. The American audience can't handle scantily clad, fan service. They can't handle all of this, so it has to be neutered or watered down to where they think we're stupid, basically. And that is not the case. So many, and I think so many Westerners, and I think so many plenty of Japanese accounts have basically, plenty of Japanese accounts, viewers, consumers, and such like that, have been very vocal about how their content is treated, watered down, is completely altered for Western audiences. And many people within the West, myself included, have been very vocal about that as well. Generally, we want to see Japanese content as Japanese content, as the way it's intended, because that's what gets people interested. That's what catches our eye. That's what gets us involved in it, wants us to get more involved in it, because of the way it is. We like the content for the way it is. What do you think that, we're seeing such a boom in Eastern content? Because stuff that's especially coming out of China and Korea, South Korea, where they found a way to break those international grounds by not having to appeal to Western standards, Western sensibilities. I'm one of the first people to say, screw the West. Make it for how you want to make it. Take the feedback, of course. Take the obvious feedback, of course, but when it comes to Western feedback, understand that it's always been filtered through this sensibility lens. And most Westerners, I'm probably going to be wrong on when I say this, but most Westerners are not with that. They don't gel with that. We don't want that. We want we want the game as the way it was intended, as the way it was intended, was the way it was created. I think it's going to be something that is very ongoing with, specifically with Japanese titles, because the mindset of you have to, in order to garner this international attention, you have to alter your content so that Westerners can understand, so that it doesn't harm Western sensibilities. And honestly, screw the West. You know, I'm being a dead horse, but we love the content for what it is. We can understand it. You know, I can guarantee that, in terms of gameplay wise, we're much more action oriented. We're much more action heavy, action focused, such like that. But then again, that's not entirely true, because we're seeing games like Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which was heavily inspired by Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy X, have a more turn-based approach, and it just completely just flies over the moon and becomes such one of the biggest games of this year alone. You know, there's so many of the indie games that I see, so many of the Western, even the Western titles have had such a heavy influence, have been heavily influenced by what we grew up playing, and a lot of it was Japanese titles, you know? Wanting to make, a studio filled with ex-Ubisoft developers wanting to make their own Final Fantasy X, wanted to make their own JRPG because they were inspired by JRPGs at the time. You know, Metroidvanias were inspired by the likes of Metroid, Castlevania, 2D side scrollers with, that were pioneered by people like Nintendo and Konami and such like that. For me, I think the West has been, throughout my life, I've been very much inspired by Western Japanese titles, and it's brought me so much joy, and it's basically my introduction to becoming a gamer and such like that. And I'm seeing a lot of, indie studios and indie titles, and especially the ones I'm interested, inspired by what we saw with the East, what we saw with Asia and such like that. I give props to the series producer for opening up to feedback, and I think that's a great thing. And props to Automaton West for sharing that feedback. But I also think that you have to understand that the West is. You may look at what we've been seeing with the AAA Western industry and how we've criticized that over and over again, but a lot of the Western audience, a lot of the Western consumers enjoy the Japanese content, enjoy the Asian content, because it's different, because it's unique, because it's Asian, because it grabs their attention. Take all feedback, I agree. Take every feedback. However, when it comes to the West, I would take it with a grain of salt, because you got to filter out, people who just want stuff to be toned down just so they can appeal to the Western audience. I'm like, no, tone it up. Make it interesting. It's going to appeal to us one way or another. And frankly, I think most general Western consumers are just find a very fun title, a very fun game, a very fun art style, something that is very appealing. That's just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll link. Like I said, I'll provide all the links to all three articles in the description, so you guys can check them out and hear your different viewpoints on them as well. And I'd like to hear from you guys on this article as well. Massive thank you to everyone in the Cute, Sexy, and Fun Nation. If you want to see your name on the screen, join the CSF Nation for as low as $1 a month. You get access to exclusive art drops, channel member emojis, which I can get back into, and all other good stuff that I deliver for my channel members. Thank you, everyone, for your incredible support. As always, you can find me on Newgrounds, Twitter, Etsy shop, all links in the description. And I thank you all for watching. I'm Makini90, Art Sermon Illustrator, and I'll see you next time for another video. So until then, stay cute, stay sexy, have fun, take care, much love, never apologize for wanting attractive women in your media, especially in video games. Japan, stay Japan, okay? We love you for who you are. You don't need to appeal to Westerners like me, because I already find your stuff appealing anyway. And above all else, never stop drawing.